Hello and welcome to another episode of Time Extend. My name is Adam Ismail, and joining me today as always is...
Brendan Norrison. Adam, good to be talking again. It's been quite some time. It feels as if we say this every time we do a new episode. But yeah, we're back again. And we've got a real Time Extend deep cut to go into here. There's going to be a few home truths about this one. There'll be people who don't even know what game this is, so hopefully we can put it in a way that people want to give it a go. But we are, of course, today going to be talking about Rally Day Europe specifically, and of course that is kind of inclusive of Rally Day Africa, which I'm sure we'll get into. But this was a game I didn't even know existed until you told me about it, basically referencing a certain fact about the game, and was basically saying it's worth playing. So this was like totally new for me, but like in terms of like your exposure to this game, I take it you found out about it quite a while before me.
Not really, actually. It's kind of funny because there's this whole trove of like PlayStation era racing games that most of them being like Japanese like origin or like only coming out in Japan, I wasn't aware of. I mean, that goes for like there are some weird games like the option games and like the Advan Racing game, like that's like I think Japanese Grand Touring Car series inspired, like stuff like that that's like more like Japanese motorsports or tuner culture that like we weren't quite ready to receive in the West. So like all of these games I've just never touched. And then Rally Day Africa was the one that was actually like in the early days of the pandemic. I think that's only when I first became aware of this game. I might have seen like the title before, and I think that for a while I confused it with like this Dakar, like Rally Dakar game that was on like the PS2 that I think it was GTC Africa. That's what I'm thinking of. Which is not, I mean, I don't even remember anything about that game. I played it when I was a little kid. But I just like, I thought I knew what it was, and it turns out that I didn't. So, yeah, discovering it, mostly thanks to our community in like 2020, people on Twitter and stuff, that turned me onto a game, and I played it, and I found out, oh, this is actually pretty great. It's a very cute little game, and it was also a fun one to like stream at the time, I remembered, because that was like the first time I ever streamed anything. And it was like I was discovering it in real time. And back then we were all so like desperate, right, to like watch each other play video games and like get away from everything in the world. So it was, it was like kind of returning to my happy place in a way.
No, absolutely. I think that for during the pandemic, that was the case for a lot of people. I would love to see like the spikes in Twitch traffic, just based on what you're saying, because that seemed to be like the de facto hobby everybody either took up, was streaming more or watching more streams, that sort of thing. I had some fun Gran Turismo streams myself during the pandemic.
Those were great.
Yeah, a bottle of Jack. Gran Turismo free Friday night. It doesn't get much better. And yeah, I think like it makes sense to discover a game like this during that scenario, because it really does feel like one of those games that could have easily went right under the radar for me and I'd never approach it, because you know yourself, when you're looking for like PlayStation 1 games to play like on the racing genre side of things, you have your kind of stalwarts, the ones that everybody has played, and you have the kind of cult classic ones as well. But like for me, this one never registered as obviously not the most popular category, but not even in the niche one, since I genuinely never heard of it. So yeah, it's interesting. So like it came through the community for you, and it just goes to show that we are still very much learning as we go as well, through other people's knowledge and experience. And this is definitely an episode that when we came up with Time Extend, I would have never imagined making it, because I didn't know the game existed. So it makes it a perfect candidate to talk about.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, there's so many games like that. Like Racing Lagoon is another. And It's funny because I feel like the world became aware of that game probably around the same time as this one, but like it was probably like just kind of a quiet, secret among the people who knew. And then like all of a sudden, I feel like I don't know, once like the retro revival sort of wave kind of hit like the PlayStation, the early 3D generation, then everybody's talking about like, oh, did you know like Square made a racing game and it's a JRPG and it's like, you know, kind of like a tuner environment and everything, and it's really weird. Rally Day Africa and Rally Day Europe are kind of the exact opposite of that, but they they come from a similar period, definitely similar time frame, and in much the same way, they're really striking games. I feel like when people talk about like pixel art, like 3D pixel art, low poly pixel art, like I imagine the cars of Rally Day Africa and Rally Day Europe in my head. The look of these games, they're very simple and they're a little cartoony, but everything looks so good. It's like exactly how you remember every PlayStation game looking, and then you go back and play most of them. Yeah. You're like, oh, this looks like shit. But these games actually do hold up that end of the bargain.
Yeah, I mean, just like stylistically, in terms of in-game play, I actually get, I don't know why particularly, but I get kind of Rage Racer-like vibes from the kind of colour palette that's going on for a lot of the tracks, and just the general kind of atmosphere of a lot of the tracks as well, in terms of like the Greek ones and the kind of the mountainous type levels as well. I kind of got those type of Rage Racer vibes, I think, from the colour palette alone. But just to kind of comment on this game feeling like a PS1 game in its entirety, like it really does. One thing I really liked from this generation when it came to racing games is the use of like chibi car models and stuff in menus and that sort of thing to show the cars off, and during like the memory battle menus, for example, when you're we'll get to the memory battle side of things. I don't want to give too much away before we get to that, but like when you see the kind of tiny chibified versions of the cars and those tiny little 3D models and stuff, it's definitely something of that generation that we don't see as much of anymore in terms of that sort of type of design, and the game does have a good vibe to it. And the one thing that I really like about it is how simple everything is. If I was to draw like a comparative to the way I think the games are structured, it's like the Sega Rally 2006 arcade mode is the one thing that I directly like kind of thought of during like the career mode and such in this game, and by that I just mean basically you've got these blocks of races, you enter the championship and you do them, and it's low barrier to entry, and then you get to go into the sometimes very difficult races as well. So overall, from a style perspective, that it does kind of really have those PlayStation 1 game vibes, but down to a T. And yeah, so it definitely kind of ticked that box for me.
Yeah, and so Rally Day Africa came out in 1998 and then was followed by Rally Day Europe in 2000. So you could say that like these games, we're obviously both huge Sega Rally fans, right? And these games pretty much like, it's funny because by then, like, Gran Turismo was on the horizon, or at that point in Japan, I guess already would have been out. These games would have seemed, like, kind of quaint in the direction that racing games were going. And Sega Rally, you know, first hit arcades in, what was 94, 95, I guess, right? So they were these like kind of scaled back little, you know, arcade racing titles, and you could still get away with that. But I thought it was interesting to find that these games released for kind of a discounted price in Japan originally. They both cost 1,500 yen, from what I found out, which roughly, I mean, today translates to about $11. So imagine getting games like this for $11. I mean, I would have paid, you know, probably 3 times that, you know, if I was a person who was, you know, buying things at the time. Because you also think that, like, you know, Sega Rally hit the Saturn, I think, a year before Rally Day Africa did. And that was a full price game and even had less content. If you think about the fact that Rally Day Africa has more cars, it has 5 tracks, and Sega Rally only has 4. So they were clearly very inspired by like what Sega and Namco were doing on the arcade side, but they actually gave you a little bit more content than you would typically get. Yeah. So it was good value for money, if nothing else.
Yeah, 100%. I think like it's something I kind of missed, that acknowledgement of like budget titles in such an explicit way, because even if like the ones I always tend to remember were like the kind of PS2 era Midas games over here, or typically the publisher, we've talked about that before, that handled a lot of like the Choro Q games and that sort of thing. Runabout as well was under that sort of kind of budget brand, and it was just funny how they would just explicitly have like the artwork in like a tiny square on the front cover where it's just like blazoned in front of it, budget series or something like that. So it's interesting when these games kind of almost set the tone right away, whether it be through the price tag or that sort of branding. It doesn't look, I can't see anything that suggests that either of the Rally Day games were kind of structured that way in terms of the cover art or anything, but obviously the cut price, I guess, gives that vibe off. But yeah, what you're saying about the content side of things, I was really surprised by the amount of cars in this game and the car classes that are in the game, because there's like some really cool inspired options in here, like key cars, right up to like kind of actual modern rally machines. It's actually, well, modern at the time. It's quite a decent selection, and there's quite a lot of unlockables as well, especially in Europe.
Yeah, you get a good gamut of rally cars from across history, the old stuff right until the moderns, and like there's even like a 911 in the first game. And, they all, they're all unlicensed car models, but they're very clearly real cars, and the liveries are even the same, but they'll replace a lot of the sponsors with like funny names. I always think like the Subaru Impreza that says Tylor on it is really funny for whatever reason. And all the car names are like just almost like Tokyo Extreme Racer. They're just like collections, jumbles of like letters and numbers. Although like in Tokyo Extreme Racer, usually those have something to do with the car, like they're like an engine code or something or a chassis code. And in this game, it's just nonsense. But it's like from the menus to like the actual racing, they feel like very polished experiences. And it's just clear that a lot of enthusiasm and love went into these games. And that is something that I remember I called attention to like years ago. I tweeted like, isn't it weird how some racing games just had like Evangelion aesthetic? And this was one of them. Like you're going through like the main menu, especially in the second game, and the text is just really big and it's in your face and the colors are crazy. And yeah, it's stylistically, it's kind of a mess, but also really good. And Rally Day Africa too, like it's interesting how with the first game, it's very much like it's set on one continent. The Africa thing kind of informs every aspect of the game, from the tracks to the music to the unfortunate announcer who has not aged very well. The voice of this announcer is not something that you would ever hear today, for good reason. And what's weird is that they left him in Rally Day Europe too, which makes no sense. I guess they just had the files, so they're like, well, we can't record anyone else, so let's just reuse these. But the music's actually pretty good. Like it's almost like they're kind of taking some sort of regional bias, but they're applying it to like the Ridge Racer sort of happy hardcore thing. Like there are a couple songs in this game that like they remind me of like Rotterdam Nation or something, but like with different instruments and more traditional, I suppose, instruments. But yeah, it's a very quirky game. It's definitely a very quirky game.
Yeah, absolutely. Like from the UI straight to the sound, as you're saying, there's definitely like this feel to the entire experience that they wanted to keep things as simple as possible, but they also didn't want it to feel generic, and it definitely doesn't feel generic. I think that's the cool thing about it. For me, it just obviously feels like, from a gameplay perspective and even the track design and such, so inspired by Sega Rally that just kind of resonates in the entire way through the game. Like for me, that's really what dragged me in, because the tracks themselves just have that level of punishability that's there. It's not so much the challenge of overtaking the AI cars or anything like that. It's more to do with the fact that if you hit a wall, you will fuck up your run, and then you may need to start again. And like that type of racing game style outside of Sega Rally is really done right, but I think this game actually does it really well, and I think that's what gives it a unique style. And I think playing that type of racing game on something that isn't a Sega racer or a Namco racer as well, it's a good job by the developers, to be honest. And from what I understand, there was at least more than a passing influence on the Sega Rally side of things, and some developers were involved, I think, in terms of Prism Arts, or so the story goes.
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing I discovered as I was trying to do research on this game, which, by the way, is impossible. Like, there's like barely any info out there about like official info, even reviews at the time. I tried to find like maybe Famitsu did a review of this game, and I tried to see if I could find that on the internet somewhere, and it's just impossible. Prism Arts, they were around, they were started in the mid 90s, or the early 90s, I think, like 92, 93, something like that. They have exactly 3 games to their name, Circuit Beat and these 2, and then they never made another game. The people who all worked on this game, it's been said, like you were saying, Bren, that like some of them were like ex-Sega or Namco devs, but what I actually found was that, and maybe it's possible that might be true, but we have so little info on these games. One of the things I saw was that Kenji Sasaki, who was one of the lead designers on the original Ridge Racer, and also then went to Sega and did Sega Rally, somebody asked him on Twitter in a thread about this game, like, do you know if anyone was anyone you're familiar with worked on this game? And he was like, to my knowledge, nobody that I worked with on Sega Rally or Ridge Racer contributed to this piece of software. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things that just keeps going around the internet, because it would make sense, right? You know, like the Sega Rally influence is obviously there. It definitely feels like a kind of a budget Sega Rally, but not necessarily in a bad way or anything. It's clear that the influence is kind of worn on its sleeve. And look, maybe there are some people, but maybe Kenji Sasaki is not aware of. But the only source that we have, the guy who was right there, Ridge Racer and Sega Rally, says that nobody working on the Rally Day games worked with him. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a bombshell for me, because like I think the vast majority of people play this game because they are under the impression that there's some sort of underlying lineage there. That is interesting. I wonder what the root cause of that potential myth, by the sounds of it, actually was. Like you're saying, it's probably just something that snowballed, but like it had to have had an origin point, which is like, that's interesting. I almost wonder if it was like a translation error or something from like an original Japanese article on the game or something, and then that got kind of passed around, or it was just that the influence is that heavy people wanted to believe.
Yeah, I found this tweet. It's from July 30th of last year, actually, so it's good timing, because until recently we didn't know this, but he said, and he wrote this in English, there was a very limited and small group of developers for Sega Rally and Ridge Racer at that time. As far as I know, no one was involved in the development of this software, and this software is referring to Rally Day. Yeah. So, which is also true.
Pretty conclusive.
these teams were small, right? So, I mean, chances are he would have been aware. And thank you so much, Kenji Sasaki, for responding to that, and thank you to Jorg Tittle for asking the question. Yeah, so that, I think that's really funny, because if anything, all it does is take away the one piece of information we thought we knew about this game. So now we actually know less about it than we previously did. But I tried to do, like I was saying, I spent hours probably over the course of the last few weeks trying to find any dirt on Prism Arts. And it's really funny, but like if you go to, I think it's Giant Bomb, because Giant Bomb happened to have a really robust, like, not quite on the level of like a Moby Games or something like that, but like a really robust list of like developers and like links to their pages and stuff like that. So I found Prism Arts page on Giant Bomb, and they linked to this website that's Prism-Arts Co. Japan. And I clicked on it thinking like, I bet this is not the same company. I bet this is a company that purchased a domain that's based in Japan that has nothing to do with Prism Arts. And off the bat, I'm kind of navigating it and I'm looking through it. I can even send you a link right now if you're interested, Brent.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and I'm going through it, and it says at the top, it says something about like a vehicle network. They're a vehicle network company, and they specialize in like CAN bus software testing and stuff like that. So they do a lot of stuff with like the data and electronic systems in cars. And fair enough, but I'm thinking like this has nothing to do with Prism Arts, right? But the funny thing is, if you go through the credits of Rally Day Africa and Rally Day Europe, what you will find, and this is in the game when you complete the game, it's also online on like Moby Games and stuff, the same names that are in the credits for the games are also on this website. These people were presidents of this company, CEOs of this company. So this group of like, I think it's 11 developers who worked on the Rally Day series. Several of them have since been, over the past 20, I guess almost 30 years, worked for this company doing like, vehicle testing. So this just invites so many more questions to me. Like, I want to know, like, were they like an automotive supplier type company that just thought like, hey, this PlayStation, it's looking like a big deal. Like, we like games. Like, can we just like throw a game together? And they happen to make these, and then they sold them. They're like, oh, that's all right. Then they went back to like doing like real like mechanical engineering stuff, or like what happened here? Because it's so fascinating to me now. Like, I need to know how this company ended up making games for like a couple of years and then just stopped.
Yeah, I know, because like on the website itself it says that since their founding in 1991, we have done the customized development and tool creation with sincerely so that we can serve our customers. So like, that doesn't sound like a company that pivoted towards this sort of stuff. It sounds as if it was like always still doing all of this type of stuff and then just decided, like you're saying, to make a few racing games on the PlayStation.
Yeah, founded in 91, as you said, and there's like a timeline, and what's really funny is that the timeline on their website has absolutely zero mention of video games.
Yeah.
Circuit Beat, Rally Day, they don't show up there. However, you can see like, it says so-and-so was assigned to president. Sure enough, that name appears in the credits. So yeah, this just... There's a couple things here. Like, one, obviously, again, how did this happen? Two, like, kudos to this company, to Prism or Prism Arts, whatever they go by today, for having this very close-knit small business that has survived for like almost 3 decades, like, and done like all this different stuff. Like, that's, yeah, I mean, hats off to them. That's that's not the story you see very often.
Not at all, because the
extent of my research.
President was. I mean, the current president that we just referenced that's in the credits, that was in 2018. That guy became president, so he really dedicated himself to Prism Arts.
That would be Hiroyuki Fujimoto, and the funny thing is, in the credits of the game, the names just appear, but they don't. There are no roles attached to those names in the game, so as a result, we don't know who did what in the development of either of these games. Thanks to Moby Games, we kind of know, like, I think one of them worked on a Mega Man title and did some stuff with like Ben Presto, who did like, I think they did like Kirby's Avalanche and stuff like that, Puyo Puyo, some weird puzzle games. So yeah, they don't seem to be video game developers necessarily by trade. They just sort of dabbled in it. So to kind of dabble in game development and make these, I mean, you must be really good at like everything you touch at that point.
Especially really because, like, the fact that the story around these games being influenced or directly developed by some ex-developers of Sega Rally and Namco games, that's a big kind of that's a big reputation to live up to, and a lot of people play these games, myself included, and go, you know what, I can see that, because that's a very good fun Sega Rally clone. So yeah, this is like very interesting, purely because they obviously didn't see development as their day job, which maybe explains the budget price for the game as well, in terms of just being like, let's make some games, put them out there.
Yeah.
Some people may enjoy them, and people did enjoy them, because I really enjoyed my time playing this game. They did a great job in terms of actually replicating that Sega Rally experience in a way I think a lot of developers by trade wish they could. So I think that it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and although I understand like the Sega Rally influence in terms of the game design, the fact that this is a rally game and stuff, and the track design to a certain extent, these games to me, they play. In some ways, they play the same, that you're racing the track, kind of as you were alluding to earlier. You're not really racing competitors, but like the handling to me is very different. And although Africa and Europe share a lot of stuff, they're only 2 years apart. All of Rally Day Africa is actually unlockable in Rally Day Europe. At least the tracks are, if you beat Rally Day Europe. But the handling is in Rally Day Africa. It's not bad. It just like takes some getting used to. It doesn't really play like most racing games I've experienced or from this time. And I think the issue I have at Rally Day Africa is I kept kind of getting stuck in slides that I didn't want to, like kind of stuck in drifts that were hard to get out of. And with Rally Day Europe, I think they improved that a little bit. They made the cars a little bit more responsive, and a little bit easier to kind of get in and out of those drifts. These games don't have like the physics. Sega Rally's handling model was so sophisticated and intuitive, and today, even though I'm sure it's not technically the most sophisticated out there by a long shot, it still feels like what the car's gonna do. It's just so intuitive, and it just feels so right, and the body roll and the suspension, simulation, stuff like that. Even though it's crude, it just feels good. And this game doesn't quite have that, but it's still fun. The tracks, I think, kind of maybe go a little bit. If I had one gripe with the track design, they're all very striking and cool to look at, and they're placed in very different environments, but they all kind of get into that lakeside problem a little bit too much, where they're just like very narrow corridors where the grass is like, on the track limits are like, you could barely fit two cars alongside each other on a lot of these tracks, on a lot of these portions. And if you nudge like the grass or you nudge a wall, it's not gonna like stop you dead like it does in Sega Rally, but like you're never going to, especially Rally Day Europe, which is impossible. You're never gonna beat the game by having a run like that. Yeah.
No, not at all. I totally agree on that front. I think that's why, in terms of actually enjoying Europe, I actually enjoyed driving the key cars more than the actual kind of bona fide rally machines, because it did feel as if you were kind of wrestling with the machines on the very tight tracks, as opposed to just enjoying the kind of flow of rally driving. And Sega Rally, as you're alluding to, Adam, like that's a game that understands the kind of fine balance between challenge and flow that rallying should have, whereas in this game it does kind of verge on that trying to put a square peg in a round hole type problem at times when you're trying to take some of these cars through some of the kind of the turns that are there. I definitely felt as if the game thrived at lower speeds and in smaller cars, and yeah. I mean, that might sound like a skill issue to anybody who's maybe not played these games, but I, as somebody who has like no lifed the art of Sega Rally, I'm no stranger to the idea that you shouldn't be hitting the sides of these tracks, but it does feel as if the more kind of prominent rally machines in the game start to make it feel more arduous and frustrating as opposed to enjoyable.
Yeah, they're really fast. And the thing is, like, you're a good Sega Rally player, so if you're saying the game is a little bit unfair, like unfairly too hard, that's something that everybody should pay attention, listen to. Because, like, Rally Day Africa is beatable, and you can get through it in a reasonable amount of time. There's obviously not that much content there, but I'd say it's a fair level of difficulty, whereas Rally Day Europe starts, and at first it seems like it's going to go a lot of, kind of the same way that Africa does, but that difficulty spike is harsh. And I think once you get, like, the first championship's not too bad, but once you get to, like, the second one, it's like tough, and then like the last class is I don't even know how you get through that. I don't know how you can be that good. I mean, the one comment I keep seeing by people who are aware of these games is that like you can unlock Rally Day Africa and Rally Day Europe if you beat the game, but no one has like confirmed it. Like you can access it with cheats, of course, but like every time I see somebody talk about it, they're just like, they say you can do this, but I don't know if I'll ever actually be able to see it for myself. And at that point, I'd just say, you know, thankfully we have like Game Shark codes and stuff. So yeah, if you're playing both, like you can just go back and forth between them on an emulator or something. It's easy enough.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's a great unlockable for somebody willing to go through it. And to be fair, given it's basically a full new game's worth of content, I guess you want to make the players try and earn it. So anybody that unlocked that would have been the coolest kid in the playground for sure. But yeah, it's a very difficult game. I near enough found it impossible to play on automatic towards the higher classes. I did have to kind of play on manual, and for my sins when it comes to these type of games, I do always go auto, because I just prefer to play it that kind of more mindless way. Not mindless, but I prefer to put the kind of the effort into trying to master the kind of the handling as opposed to the gear shifting side of things. But like any good arcade game, there always comes that time where you need to move to manual to really get the most out of it. I feel as if in the Rally Day games, especially Europe, it's more of a mandated, like, you won't be able to maximise these cars unless you learn to drive them manual, which, you know, it's not necessarily a bad trait of the games, especially for people willing to go on and talk about them for an hour on a podcast. But, like, I can imagine if you're trying to just enjoy this game in a kind of casual capacity, I personally, and I don't know how far you actually got yourself, Adam, or if you were playing manual from the start or not, but no, well, I got to, I think it was like the F2 category in auto, and then I was like, wow, I cannot do this. And I had to basically go to manual, learn that through the key cards for a bit, and then just kind of try and translate that over, because I think the thing about the track design is it's kind of inspired, like, I think Africa's more inspired by Sega Rally directly than Europe, because Europe goes super heavy on the 90-degree turns and the very tight hairpin corners. And I'm not just talking about like one 90-degree turn here. There are so many S-bends that are like so fucking square to navigate, and it becomes really hard to put your Howard, is that Citroen Xara, whatever they call it, like Howard, I think it is that one's called, trying to fit those kind of equivalent modern rally cars through those turns becomes an exercise in pain.
Yeah, I'm trying to refresh my memory, so I'm like firing up some YouTube footage now, and I'm seeing, I think Too Loose is the track that sticks in my mind from Rally Day Europe, because it's it's just, it starts out with like a bunch of like 90-degree corners, and it's a very cool track. Like it passes by the Colosseum, or I guess not the Colosseum, this is in Rome, I don't know what that structure is, I have no idea. Maybe they just decided to move it to France, but yeah, it's like a city track, and then it kind of goes into the countryside and the mountains, and I really like, you know, it's kind of classic like rally game fare, I guess, and like it's mostly tarmac, and the surface changes in this game don't really necessarily change the handling in the same way they do in like Sega Rally. It's not quite sophisticated in that way, but I found the tracks, you know, they're hard, especially when you get towards the end, and I think it's Rally Day Africa that ends with the one, it's a Kilimanjaro, where it's like it has like the snow, it's like a snowy mountain, and there's just a cliff on one side, so you can just fall off the track. They're very tough, but they're fun. Like, that's the thing, they're all fun, and I think you just get to this point, at least I got to this point, because I didn't try and like, you know, learn how to drive a manual or anything like that, because it really doesn't do anything for me in these old games. But, I think you get to a point where you have to ask yourself, you know, is this just becoming more frustrating than fun? And for a while, even if you're losing, it's kind of fun to drive, but then eventually I just gave up, because I'm like, I don't know, just use a code or something.
Yeah, I think I got to the final championship on the A class before I just topped out, basically. I just could not get over the line. Well, in fact, it might be... It's the second to the last one, so it might be S or A. I can't remember how it's structured in Rally to Europe. But, yeah. The funny thing, just because you mentioned the Kilimanjaro thing, I love the fact that one of the pace notes literally has like a skull and bones. Like,
oh yeah.
to let you know about the danger. It's just like you get all the usual kind of like turn indicators, and then there's just like crossbones, and I think the announcer says something like "Waja" or something like that. But yeah, there's not many rally games that would just explicitly reference "you will die" if you don't actually tackle this obstacle.
Right. And the thing is the cars too, so like you can't unlock all of the cars just by doing the championship either, and they don't, they don't explain any of this to you. Now, fortunately, while this game is a Japanese import, almost none of it is in Japanese. It's all pretty much in English, but that's because there's really not that much to explain. So it kind of gets away with that, but they don't tell you, like, I'm on YouTube right now, and somebody's racing against the AutoZam AZ1 clone that's in the game that I guess is called the Degger MZ1SS. And it says that to unlock this car, you have to play the memory battle mode, put them as an opponent on the Toulouse track, and beat them. So, like, not only do you have to explore the memory battle mode, know what that's about, which I never really was able to figure out, but you also have to make sure you beat them on the right track. Because if you beat them on the wrong track, then I guess you won't get the car. Like, yeah. It's one of those things that would absolutely drive you insane if a new game tried to do this, but like an old game, you're just like, being weird and nonsensical is part of the charm here.
Well, that very type of unlockable is very familiar in our good friend Runabout as well, if you recall. There are a lot of strange ways of unlocking cars in that game, so it's definitely like a budget Japanese era developer type like quirk in these games by the looks of it. It'd actually be a good point, I guess, to talk about the memory battle side of things, because did you work out exactly what it was, Adam, or like did you mess about with it that much?
No, because, I mean, I think, and that's kind of my fault, because I think I just assumed it required some sort of save on someone else's memory card or something. I had to race them. Right. I don't know. Did you figure it out?
I actually messed about with this a lot more than I probably should have. So
okay, interesting.
So basically, memory battle mode, I initially thought it was just going to be like a time trial mode based on you set a time and then you can race it, or somebody can bring their memory card over and you can burst their time.
Exactly.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's actually a pretty interesting concept where basically you set a lap time and then the game holds that kind of lap you've set like a time trial. But it instantiates an opponent on the track that acts like a regular AI. So once you've loaded one lap in, you then can choose another car and race that car. But it isn't actually a ghost, it's an actual AI vehicle, so you can like crash into it, you can like get caught behind it, that sort of thing. Okay. And the car that you've set the time in previously will still try and take the track the exact way you set the lap, but obviously adjust to the fact that it's actually in a real race. And the coolest part about this is that you can actually load 4 at the same time, so you can basically create like a 4-way race between your own lap times, and they will actually try and overtake each other and stuff.
Wow. This is like, is this like something that Sophie does in Gran Turismo 7?
Yeah, that's what I was going to, like, seriously, that's the exact thing that popped into my mind when I was messing about with it. I'm like, fucking Rally Day had Rally Day Europe had Sophie this whole time. But like,
I mean, this company was like at the forefront of AI too, apparently. They did it all.
It's very primitive, but like, it's still something cool, and the best part about it is like, they aren't picky about like the parameters of what you do. So you choose a track, but you could have like 4 cars across 4 different classes, and then like you can like create a weird like combined amount of racers like that have your characteristics for moving through the track, but all driving different cars at the same time.
Yeah.
And there was even times where a car in a lower class would somehow finish ahead of one of the faster classes because of stuff that I had done on the track to basically like kind of mess up their flow for going round the tracks. So
yeah,
it's pretty cool, man. Like, it's worth just having a look at.
What I'm especially interested in is like by what parameters do they achieve like it's doing your lap but not perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's doing your lap but also with the ability to like deal with other cars on track. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm going to go back and give it a try because I just kind of counted out. Like, I'm not going to lie.
I'll hold my hands up. Yeah. I did the exact same. The only reason I looked at it was because when I posted a Rally Day Europe thing on the Twitter account, somebody said in the comments, like, oh, I spent so much time on Memory Battle in this game. And I'm like, either this guy has a lot of friends who all took their memory cards round to load their time trial times, or this is something a bit more than what I thought it was. And rightfully enough, it's like Wish.com Sophie. It's just like... There's obviously something going on that allows them to like take these time trial times and like make like they can still just race, which makes it a lot more interesting than just versing time trials. So it's worth having a look at for that reason alone. I imagine as well it could be pretty cool because you could theoretically load multiple different racers and get those cars to race each other alongside yourself, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something a bit more cool than I thought was going to be there, and that was the thing that really kind of took me by surprise because like we've talked about the fact this is a budget racer, it's a fairly straightforward kind of rally experience in that way, but this is definitely a mode that I can't recall. Maybe you'll know, Adam, but I don't know many games that would have a similar system to this where the loaded times, for lack of a better term, are actually like physically interactable objects on the racetrack that you can like kind of race like a regular AI. It's interesting.
I'm not aware of that either. I know that like Sega Touring Car Championship, if you had like the backup cart on the Saturn, had like an AI driver you could train, which was basically that's like cool. You drove and the game kind of monitored you, but like I mean, who knows what like clandestine box of like mysteries like governing that driver's behavior, and they're not like copying your lap times exactly, right? They're kind of copying what they think your behavior is. It's more of like a drivatar thing, I guess. So yeah, that's cool. And it's it's the kind of thing that like again you got like so much value, like you're saying, from a budget game. I mean, this game was so cheap, and I almost wonder, like, I don't know how the sort of philosophy on this, like the consumer shopping philosophy was in Japan at this time. I have absolutely no idea. But, like, I would have counted a game like this out, you know, because a lot of those, like, Midas published games or whatever, they were not good. They were not good. No. There might be one or two, and some of the Churro Qs were good, but, like, most of them... You know, most of the games with those banners. Here we had Valcom and Jester, and those were always awful. So yeah, I almost wonder if these games were a little bit more successful, maybe Prism Arts would have made the full switch to a different industry. It's it's something that perhaps. We'll never know.
No, we will never know. But it looks like they've been successful in their other. Non-racing game endeavours. So, you know what? Maybe this was the foundations of how they became that simulation company. They made Memory Battle mode, and they were actually like, oh, we're really good at this sort of thing. Let's build out actual simulation stuff for buses or whatever vehicles it was.
It's funny because you hear a lot about how a lot of your favorite games, or not just games, but just frankly just products in general, even cars, just come from like kind of weird little skunkworks operations that are happening sort of in the cover of darkness by a couple employees. And like I remember that's a story I think behind Wipeout HD, is that like somebody at Studio Liverpool was like, let's figure out how to get like, you know, the Wipeout games on the PSP stuff, like let's get that running on the PS3 to see if we could like do 1080p and take advantage of the system. And then they were playing it and they were like, well, this has to be our next game, this is great. So I mean, maybe this has a similar origin story of just like these guys all clearly they knew They knew about the automotive industry. They were probably, fans at some level. I mean, that much is obviously clear from the game. And they like video games, so they just decided to throw something at the wall. And in my head, anyway, that's going to be how I reflect on these games now.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the kind of deficiencies and like the handling model and that sort of thing as well also imply it's not been like a fully dedicated game development in a traditional sense, in the way that this is something they wanted to make like their whole shindig as a company, since clearly they were still working things out depending on what was successful and what wasn't. So I think it's an interesting game to me purely because I had zero expectation going in. Like, I didn't have any preconceptions about this game. It doesn't have a million hits for calling it a cult classic or an underrated game. I mean, we were talking just before we went on air, Adam, about the fact that your article on Jalopnik is one of the first things that appear for this game, and that shows the level of coverage, because aside from you covering it, there isn't much else out there. And yet it probably does have enough about it to maybe warrant a bit more attention and kind of understanding from people about what the game is all about. And the kind of the memory battle thing just encapsulated that for me, in terms of like, there's always something really hype about finding a little part of a game that you didn't know was in there, or you didn't quite understand how it operated, and then it actually turns out to be something really cool. Yeah, and absolutely. I would have never guessed that this game had something like that. So it's one of these things where I'm really glad that I found out about the game. It's not as if it's a 10 out of 10 or a bona fide classic, but it's definitely one of those unique titles that you should, and today especially with how easy it is to access these types of games in a perfectly legal manner, of course, when you already own the game. It's a cool little racing ditty. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, you actually just reminded me to look up prices of these games online, and if I recall, Europe is very expensive.
Really?
Africa might be less expensive. Let me see. Yeah, I'm seeing copies of Rally Day Europe. This one I think might even still be like shrink wrapped, and it's $270. I'm seeing other ones for $130, $160. Yeah, the secret is out about these games apparently.
I have no idea how, because if you type in even something as generic as a Rally Day Europe review on Google, you get like one hit. And it's just like somebody in WordPress like reviewing it. It's not, like I said, it's not as if it's had a mass amount of coverage even from the kind of the deeper cut like YouTube channels and stuff. It's definitely a game that could do with a little bit more attention. So hopefully anybody listening does give it a go, because it might surprise you. You might find the handling insufferable. Who knows? But the cool thing is it's a game that a lot of people don't know exists.
Yeah. So as far as Rally Day Africa, it is all over the place. The top trending, or however eBay ranks these things, is $21 or best offer from Japan, which is perfectly reasonable. But then we also have $85, $88, $12, but just for the case. $96, $150, and then $35. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why this game's all over the mark, but I for one feel that and I'm sure this is not a hot take or anything, but the current stupid speculative classic games market or whatever is absolutely atrocious. So yeah, absolutely no shame in playing these games the way that we all have to.
yeah, exactly. Tell people want to stop extorting cash from old, irrelevant now video games. That is the best option you have for playing a title like this. Because for as much as I did enjoy playing it, I'm not sure I would pay, like, for example, on eBay UK, there's a copy here for £50, which is maybe just that bit over what I would consider paying. That 20 to 30 seems decent enough.
I mean, I think these games are very, very good. I would honestly, in terms of quality, I would put them right up there alongside, at least the first two Ridge Racer games. And I think these are the kinds of games that, like, if I had grown up with them, they would be for sure right up there with Ridge Racer and Sega Rally and Daytona, because they're absolutely the same thing. But like, it's just a consequence of not having that nostalgia, right? Because it's weird because even though these games only came out in Japan, you know, you're on YouTube and you see so many. There are actually like a startling number of comments that are like, "This game was my childhood." But it's written by people in English who seem to have like, you know, they were from Europe or something like that. So I wonder how those people got this game. You know, I know imports back in the day weren't necessarily impossible, and there were some games that would come out, and if you had the mod chip on your PlayStation or what have you, you know, you could play them that way. And I think Europe was a good hub for that because kind of at the crossroads of everything, right? But yeah, so if you have the nostalgia for this game, I completely get it. I completely get it. I don't think that they lose anything, that they give up anything to a good number of like Sega and Namco racers. You know, is this, you know, at the level of Sega Rally? No, but like it's at the level, I think, of like pretty much every other racing game on the Saturn. It's really, really good. And like the performance is really good and the graphics are fantastic. Like these games drive, like they play so smoothly. Everything's, you know, seems to be 30 frames per second. There's never a hiccup. They sound great. The soundtracks are nuts, especially in Rally de Africa, as we said. So overall, just two absolutely fine games. You know, I'd put them up there with pretty much anything else from this era.
I'm actually just really frustrated that, like you were mentioning, Adam, Europe was all about that modded PS1 life for quite some time. Mm-hmm. Hence my affiliation with Pepsi Man so much and loving that. I used to go to my dad's friend's house and he just hand me like a big wad of CDRs and just be like, enjoy. And I'm just really frustrated that Rally de Europe was never one of these games because the guy was just the games we used to get just heading down like every Wednesday for the latest bundle of games. Like you're talking some real deep cuts. I'm really frustrated this one made it through the cracks, but then again, the release years of the games probably mean it was more towards the kind of 2000 for Rally de Europe, I believe, and 98 for Africa, was it? You said, Adam? Yeah. So like, I'll forgive him for Europe, but I'm disappointed in you, Peter. If you're listening.
If Peter could have done it differently. Exactly. You got Pepsi Man though, so.
Yeah, exactly. Like which is
clearly the biggest inspirational media force in your life. So. Well,
that was it. Like I got the disc because obviously, like back then, the way that a lot of these guys that did this stuff work was basically you could get the disc for a cheaper price than the disc plus kind of what is it you call the PS1 cases again? It's got a name, isn't it? Like
the jewel cases.
Jewel case, yeah, diamond case, Jesus, jewel case. Like that costs more money. Like Peter's not just handing those out for a few pounds. So it was like I loved Pepsi Man so much, and then like for my birthday he got me like the fake jewel case version, and it was just like that's how much Pepsi Man meant. And you know what? Maybe Rally de Africa or Rally de Europe might have been up there as well.
Yeah. I think that pretty much covers everything. And as usual, I was worried that we weren't going to have more than 20 minutes of content to talk about this game, but we made it to the hour. I just think it's just such a curiosity, you know. It's really this is one of those games that like really upsets me that like it's impossible to talk to anyone who had any hand in making it. You know, like more than anything else we've talked about, I don't know if there's any other game that's going to cross the Time Extend desk. Maybe if we had an episode about A1 Games Racing, perhaps that would do it. That's a game that just has the racing game on the PlayStation.
Shit, yeah. the iconic.
That's a budget title that is horrible. That was the Simple 1500 or whatever. I can't remember what I think it was called. Like Simple 1000 or Simple 1500 The Race in Japan, and that game is every bit what you expect a budget PlayStation racing game to be. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm having a look at the kind of a Let's Play footage of this.
It's so bad.
Mate, it's so funny though. Like you can clearly see from like the there's, I think it's like tutorial or something. It's a tutorial that's telling you the controls and stuff, but there's like elements telling you, like, it basically says speed up and down, then it's a photo of like a car accelerating, then it braking, but like it's like structured in that kind of Gran Turismo like way, like the yellow fonts and the white text.
Yeah, it's got the same font as Gran Turismo. Yeah. I wrote about, so this was another one I wrote about, and I really lobbied. This was like a end of the day, last minute shit post at Jalopnik, and I really lobbied my editor to let me just make the headline "Let's talk about racing," which I think became the Google SEO headline, but the actual headline ended up they made it "Let's talk about H-Tex racing."
I'm looking at the way these cars move and it's making me feel sick. Holy shit, that looks awful.
Yeah, it's definitely become a meme in the time extend circles. I love the advice that it gives you for like driving too, because the speed up and down page, it says, this is a tutorial and they're trying to teach you how to play a game, and they say, press and hold cross button to accelerate. A manual transmission is needed to change the gear up when the tachometer right side of the screen indicates RPM of around 700. And I like that because, like, is that true of all cars? I mean, I guess it is for this game, right? Like, this game has like 3 cars, so, you know.
Reverse. When you crash head on and can't move at all, you need back up your vehicle. It's true. It's not incorrect.
Yeah, these games are. Or this game, at least. Some of these are actually pretty good. I think there's one called like Shooter Space Shot or something like that. That our good pal Andrew Elmore tells me is actually a pretty good game. So yeah, go try some of the simple games, but maybe not this one. We should have an episode all about budget racing games.
Yeah,
just play a bunch of them and like restrict ourselves. Yeah, maybe we'd have to like restrict ourselves to only spending like 10 minutes on each or something, so we could get through a bunch of them.
Like speed dating type rounds, but probably budget racing games. Yeah, that's a cool idea. One thing I was actually going to say about Rally Day Europe and Africa and that Prism Arts website, I wonder if you emailed them about the game, if they would like confirm that they made it. I mean, they must have, based on the guy on the website, but I'm very curious if like they just seen in their inbox when they come in from a weekend and they just see an email and it's like Rally Day Europe and all the memories flood back of the time that they completed the racing genre, and I wonder if you would actually get a response.
Yeah, I mean they do have email addresses at their website, so I think I would be just concerned that it wouldn't get across, but they could run it through Google Translate if they really care. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I'm going to say. I guess it'd just be like, I would just like to know how this happened. Thank you so much. I've been playing your game, and yeah, that'll be, I'm going to do that right after this, and then hopefully in a future Time Extend episode, we can return to this with some good news for everybody.
And we can finally share some form of information about this damn game and its invisible footprint online.
Yeah. And their website really is great. Like, you should all, if you're curious about this, you should go there because, like, it is so, and I'm not saying this to make fun of them or anything. It's so dry. It's so, like, purely, like, industry trade. This company sells metal boxes that for testing vehicle systems, and that has about as much creativity as you can imagine it has. So like it's funny because like to me it just indicated like, oh, this cannot possibly be the same Prism that made this game, but sure enough it seems like it is. So
yeah.
Anyway, I think that just about covers it. I think for the next episode, we were talking a while ago. We were talking about doing a dirt retrospective, which
that'd be a cool one to do next. I think something a bit more well known, I guess.
Yeah,
another rally game though. Another rally game.
It's a year of rally. I remember our first or our second episode, we just talked about rally games because it was like there were a lot of rally games coming out that year, like 2017 or whenever it was.
Yeah, how scary is that?
It's been a while, yeah.
It has indeed.
But yes, as always, you can find us at time_extend on Twitter. And we'd also like to point out that if you want to join our Discord, we recently made it a little bit easier. You could, we're falling behind on the messages a little bit. So you can just click on the link that we have there at our Twitter bio, and that should take you to the right place, and you could just hop on there. So we'd love to have you. We have some fun there. Talk about games like Rally Day Europe and Rally Day Africa, and all sorts of other things that I'm only learning about every day. So it's a good time.
Yeah, exactly. You may be the person that brings up a game that we didn't know about that then becomes an episode, as has become the case here. So, encourage you to join the Discord. It's great fun. Great bunch of guys and gals in there. The message system for Discord worked fine until like some of the memes and shit blew up on the Twitter, and then it's just like we just constantly forget to look at those message requests. So I think making the invite a bit easier to find should help with that.
It was a combination of a couple things. To be honest with everybody, like we initially instituted that some years back because we were being kind of inundated with trolls. I mean, like inundated is a strong word. There would never be more than like 2 of them at any given time, but it was just annoying enough to make our lives hell. So we decided to scale that back. But now like our Discord actually has things in place to stop people, or to make it very easy to get rid of them. So yeah, it's we're in a better place now. But yeah, it's probably, I mean, this podcast is obviously how everything started, but I think the Discord has been our proudest achievement.
100%. Yeah, without a doubt, I totally agree with that. And then one of the things as well, I'm going to do the very annoying podcaster thing here, and also ask that if you have been listening to us for quite some time, we would really appreciate any sort of reviews that you can also put, like on Spotify and stuff. I did not know there was a review system on Spotify the other day until I seen this, and I was like, oh wow, right, okay. So thank you to everybody who has reviewed. I think it's like a 4.9 we've got just now. Like, holy shit! Like, thank you very much. Is Apple Podcasts got it as well?
Apple Podcasts definitely has, because I remember for so long listening to podcasts that were like, give us a 5-star on iTunes, but I never knew that Spotify did that either. I think I learn this and forget about it every couple of months because I don't use Spotify to listen to ours or any podcasts. But apparently we have a 4.9. From what I can see, it does not tell me how many reviews it's based on. I might have to go into like the Spotify portal. And we won't be like, there are some podcasts that will sell for nothing less than a 5. Frankly, with how infrequently, with how infrequently we post, the 4.9 is completely fine with me.
No, exactly. That's why I'm saying, like, leave a review. I really don't care what the score is. I don't really get why people do care about that, I guess, because if people are listening to a podcast in the first place, it at least implies there's some sort of enjoyment there. So, like Adam says, with the infrequent release schedule, mostly down to myself recently, just been insanely busy. I apologise to you in person.
You also battled like at least like 4 diseases, mysterious diseases, going all the way back to like right before Christmas.
Yeah, it's been like crazy. There's been COVID, there's been the norovirus, there's been food poisoning, shout out KFC, then there's been a flu, still pelotoning in between all of that though. So it's been pretty fucking crazy. But finally got around to recording this, and we say it every time, but we will try and be more frequent. And apologies for everybody who was absolutely dying to hear about Rally Day Europe and Africa, but we got there.
Yeah, again, you know what you're getting at this point. We've been doing this for 5-6 years, so there are times where I think we started last year, and the podcasts were actually pretty frequent. We had one going up every 2 weeks or so, and which was like always the goal for the schedule. And then that's not how we started 2022, or 2023. I mean, but yeah, it is what it is. So
that means like the early to middle part is going to be banging though.
Yeah, exactly.
that's how we'll hit our groove. Then follow me a little bit again.
Yeah. Check back in next episode when we apologize for we said we get to you sooner, but it's May.
Yep, that's it. But the good thing is we can still go with these little gaps and still talk about little games like this, like you were saying, Adam, for like an hour. So hopefully that meets the appetite everybody has for discussions on these games. If we could discuss them for 3 and 4 hours, we would. But I think to complete these games, if you were a demigod of racing games and could actually complete them, there's about 2 hours of content here. So I think that's a good ratio of discussion to content.
Yeah, I'd say. Well, all right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking with us through all of the infrequent releases and all of that. Thanks for following us. Thanks for everything. And you'll hear from us again sometime soon.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Many more of these deadly curves, but try to hold it in a Olympiad and master them all. Who said this was going to be easy? Right. This is the expert level. Too many difficult spots on the circuit. I won't have time to go over them all. I'll just let you know, real killers, listen carefully. You want to just hang on with information I'm going to tell you. Then there's a hairpin curve. And how long the turn. After this curve, a nasty little turn awaits you, which will drive you nuts. Full braking will be required, where many drivers will likely overtake.